Hey guys, tonight we're sinking into something slow, strange, and strangely shiny. You're walking through a furnace. No, not metaphorically. Picture this: an active volcano, the air thick with metallic smoke, glowing magma puddles burbling at your feet, and the constant clang, hiss of hammer on molten bronze. That's where we meet him. Hephaestus, the god of fire, forge, and wow, did he just animate that statue? Yeah, he's in there, limping around like he misplaced his crutches, but still determined to invent artificial intelligence 3,000 years ahead of schedule. You probably won't survive this. Between the lava pits, metal giants, and the occasional lightning bolt flying in from Zeus's corner office, odds aren't great. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time down in the comments. Are you drifting off in Detroit or dozing in Denmark? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle deeper into the volcanic forge. Mount Etna, if you're wondering, which, according to some ancient poets, is both a mountain and a divine foundry. The air buzzes with an almost mechanical rhythm, as if the entire place breathes with the cadence of industry. Hephaestus, god of craftsmen, is here in the thick of it. His back is hunched, his gait is off, but his hands are impossibly fast, twisting, molding, assembling with uncanny precision. He's not what you'd expect from an Olympian. No flowing locks or glowy six-pack. Just suit, scars, and a stubborn refusal to let physical limitations stop him from literally building an army. Out of metal. Because walking into a battle with mortals just wasn't flashy enough. Historians still argue whether his forge was purely myth or if it symbolized a real volcanic metalworking culture around Sicily. But myth or metaphor, it's the birthplace of some of the weirdest tech ideas in mythology. Here's the fun twist. Hephaestus didn't just hammer weapons. No, he was sculpting life into things. Big things. Moving things. Shiny bronze things that made clanking noises when they walked and possibly needed occasional rebooting. And it wasn't just the god's divine mojo that made the place hum. Legend says he had help. You hear them now. Soft steps of metal on stone. Bronze maidens. Not just statues, but assistants. Forged with hearts of gold, maybe literally, and the smarts to anticipate their master's needs. They serve him water, fetch tools, adjust bellows. One even side eyes you, and you swear its eyebrows move. You can't help but wonder, was this the first robotics lab in history? Think Boston Dynamics, but with more lava and fewer safety protocols. Quirkier still is how Hephaestus worked alone. The other gods had entourages, fanfare temples. He got a forge and a pile of scrap metal. Some say he liked it that way. Less drama, more sparks. But others whisper that he had to work alone because even the gods didn't really know what he was up to. Now and then, he emerges. Limping, yes, but with a look that says, I just invented a self-driving chariot. And you know what? He probably did. One of his favorite toys was a golden wheeled cart that could navigate Olympus without a driver. Not magical, mechanical. That's the whole point. He wasn't just slinging fireballs. He was building tech. Ancient, shiny, slightly terrifying tech. Even today, engineers look at myths about his creations. Talos the bronze giant, the self-opening doors of temples, Otto, pour wine goblets, and squint. Could any of that be symbolic of real Hellenistic automata? Some wind-powered, some steam-driven, others just dream-born. Possibly. The Greeks were more mechanically advanced than we often give them credit for, and nestled in all that innovation was Hephaestus. Clanking around, ignored by the glamour gods, making things that shouldn't move, but did. You duck to avoid a spray of molten sparks. Somewhere nearby, a hammer rings out again, and as the smoke clears, you see it. Half-built, 7 feet tall, chestplate engraved with looping, unreadable glyphs. A bronze torso, connected to limbs via strange, rotating sockets. Its head is a blank faceplate with eye holes that seem to stare despite the emptiness. Hephaestus is building another one. The light of the forge flickers over his features, his beard frizzled, sweat sizzling off his brow. And for a second, you catch something in his expression. Not pride. Exactly. Not even satisfaction. Just necessity. As if this robot army isn't for glory but protection. Or maybe loneliness. Or just something to do while Zeus has another scandal and Hera throws more celestial shade. A small mechanical owl flutters past you, its wings clicking like a toy helicopter. It perches, cocks its head, and lets out a warbled hoo. You stare. It stares back. Welcome to Greek mythology's least chill workshop. You step back in time now. Way back, to the part of Hephaestus' story that most myths either rush through or conveniently skip. Brace yourself, because it's a family drama messier than a reality TV reunion. You're hovering near the throne room on Mount Olympus. Gold columns shimmer. Ambrosia flows like boxed wine at a godly picnic, and somewhere off-screen, a baby is wailing. That baby, Hephaestus. And just as he's finding his adorable baby god legs, he's grabbed by Hera, his own mother, and flung clean off the mountain. Yes. You read that right. Depending on which version of the myth you cozy up with, this moment is either the divine equivalent of punting a football or a slightly more poetic fall from Grace metaphor. But in both versions, the result is the same. Hephaestus plummets from the sky, baby limbs flailing down for a full day and night. No parachute, no winged sandals, just gravity and bad parenting. Some storytellers say Hera hurled him because he was born ugly and lame, his foot twisted, his body imperfect. Others insist it was Zeus who did the tossing during one of their marital meltdowns when Hephaestus dared to defend his mother. Either way, the endgame, faceplant into the sea. Ouch. You float down into the turquoise calm of the Aegean now, where Hephaestus crash-landed and was scooped up by... Plot twist. Sea nymphs. Specifically, Thetis, the eventual mom of Achilles and Eurynome, two gentle, oceanic aunties, who took one look at this broken godling and said, "You're ours now." Historians still argue whether this fall symbolizes an ancient ritual casting out, or if it's just a mythological coping mechanism for why their tech god was so socially awkward. Either way, the symbolism is hard to miscast down, but still destined to rise, and tinker, and weld. Under the waves, the myths say, he grew up surrounded by coral castles, bubble-breathing dolphins, and an endless supply of pearlescent shells, his first raw materials. And while most toddlers were chewing on their toes, Hephaestus, he was already hammering together tiny thrones and delicate necklaces for his aquatic foster moms. Baby's first forge. Now, you might expect that after such a traumatic rejection, he'd try to win back Olympus with a nice fruit basket. But no, he forged his revenge. Specifically, an intricately designed golden throne for Hera, inlaid with gems and glowing with divine luster. Too beautiful to resist, she accepted it with zero hesitation and plopped herself right down. Snap. Click. Trap engaged. Suddenly the throne held her fast. Arms, legs, everything locked in place. No lever, no password. Just mechanical genius fused with divine pettiness. The gods panicked. "Someone get him back up here!" they cried. But Hephaestus, he was sipping kelp tea underwater like, "Nah, I'm good." You can almost hear the conch shell phones ringing underwater. One by one, emissaries were sent to beg him to return and release Hera. All failed until Dionysus, god of wine and parties, tried a different tactic. He got Hephaestus drunk. Like karaoke with Poseidon drunk. And in that sloppy, giggling state, Hephaestus agreed to come back, riding into Olympus on a donkey, half passed out, probably humming sea shanties, and looking more like a mythological hangover than a hero. The throne trap deactivated. Hera, released and furious, but Olympus had just rediscovered something it desperately needed: a builder, a fixer, a creator. The fallout from the throne incident wasn't all awkward family dinners. It marked a turning point. Hephaestus was finally given an official seat among the Olympians, full god status restored. He got a proper forge, though he later moved operations to Etna. Real estate's cheaper, fewer paparazzi, and a job title, divine blacksmith. From rejected child to passive-aggressive prankster to divine craftsman, you have to admire the trajectory. Still, every now and then, the other gods side eye him. You can feel it when you wander Olympus. Most of them dazzle, shimmering robes, sparkling auras, constant tick-tock energy. Hephaestus? Soot-smeared tunic, ash on his face, grace on his fingers, but his eyes burn with something different, a brilliance. An idea always turning over. 1,000 unfinished blueprints dancing behind his irises. And that foot, the one that never quite healed after the fall, is a reminder to every god in the room. Throw someone away, and they might just invent robots to replace you. You're still in Olympus, but now you sink below the waves again. Back to the sea caves of Hephaestus' childhood. It's quieter here, filtered in blue, green light, the swaying fronds of kelp brushing your ankles like lazy cats. Thetis and Eurynome float nearby, always in motion, braiding seaweed and whispering lullabies to the boy. God who should have been a star in the sky, but instead grew up in the shadows. Hephaestus is older now, maybe 10, maybe 100. Time's fuzzy with gods. He's restless, his hands move constantly, folding shells, bending coral, weaving fish bones into miniature levers. He's building things nobody asked for. Tiny mechanisms that paddle themselves in circles, crab shell figures with hinged jaws, even a sea sponge that dances on springs. His foster mothers don't quite understand what he's doing, but they smile and hang his creations like ornaments around their watery grotto. And here's the thing, he doesn't laugh. Not really. His joy isn't noisy. It hums deep and low, like magma behind basalt. And it starts glowing brightest the moment he decides he wants revenge. You hover nearby, watching him sketch a throne in the sand with a bit of driftwood. Not just any throne. Her throne. Hera's. The mother who hurled him like unwanted luggage. He doesn't call it revenge, not even to himself. But oh, he knows exactly what he's doing. For months, maybe years, he works on it in secret, gathers gold from shipwrecks, smelts it in steam vents, polishes it with pearls, adds intricate carvings, roses, lions, clouds, the works. It's not just beautiful, it's bait. The key mechanism, springs made from rare mollusk spines, folding arms that snap like oyster shells. And at the heart, a locking system so clever even Hermes would need a cheat code. Now picture Olympus again. Hera, pleased with the unexpected gift, sits down with a smirk. Click, the throne bites, the arms close. Her legs are pinned, her arms sealed to the rests. She's trapped in her own majesty, and not even Zeus, with all his thunder and marital denial, can figure out how to undo it. Cue panic. Apollo tries burning it. Doesn't work. Ares tries brute force. Breaks 3 swords. Athena smirks but offers no help. She respects a solid bit of craftsmanship. And Hephaestus? He's still underwater, toying with a mechanical crab that delivers grapes. Refusing to budge. Here's the quirky detail. While Hera is locked up, Olympus actually runs more smoothly. No passive, aggressive lightning storms. No suspicious transformations of mortals into cows. Just awkward silence, punctuated by the occasional clank from the throne. Eventually, as we said before, Dionysus is sent in. Not because he's persuasive, but because he's entertaining. He descends into the sea grotto with a skin of wine, a lute, and 3 jokes about Poseidon's seaweed beard. By the 3rd cup, Hephaestus is giggling into his beard. The throne gets a manual override. Hera is released, stiff-legged, humiliated, but wiser. And when Hephaestus finally returns to Olympus, it's not as a guest. He returns like a contractor you cannot replace. He arrives on a donkey, slouched but unbothered, and the gods watch him with the kind of wary admiration usually reserved for bees useful, but don't anger it. Historians still debate whether the throne trap symbolizes rebellion or divine reconciliation. But either way, it seals Hephaestus's reputation, not just as a craftsman, but as someone whose creations are smarter than their owners. You follow him now to his new workshop, a place carved into the bones of the mountain. The ceiling pulses red from lava above, and every surface is strewn with tools, half-built projects, and oddities. There's a harp that plays itself, a statue that weeps wine, a drawer full of metal birds that peck at invisible seeds. His first commission, a set of new thrones for all 12 Olympians, except this time they don't trap, they levitate. Self-clean, adjust to lumbar preferences. The gods are floored. Even Zeus mutters something about finally getting decent lumbar support. But the old throne, the one that bit. Hephaestus doesn't dismantle it. He mounts it in the far back corner of his forge, lets it sit there like a warning, or a trophy, or maybe just a reminder everything you build says something about you. And sometimes, what you say in bronze lasts longer than words. You're back in Olympus, and things have changed. Hephaestus is no longer the snubbed child tossed from divine heights. He's now their go-to guy. The one god you absolutely need when your chariot falls apart, your magic girdle loses signal, or someone melts the gates of heaven again. In short, Hephaestus gets his job back, and he doesn't come quietly. You follow him through the grand halls, his sandals thudding unevenly against the golden floors. It's not grace thereafter, it's talent. And no one, not even Athena with her infinite knowledge, can compete with what Hephaestus does with a forge and a bit of bronze. His return isn't all cheers and confetti. Hera pretends she's over the throne incident. Zeus offers a stiff nod, the way you might nod at the plumber who once caught you in your towel. But the tension? Oh, it hangs in the air like burnt ambrosia. Still, they need him. Desperately. He's escorted back to his old forge, now expanded, renovated, and somehow still covered in soot. You notice new tools, celestial lathes, steam-driven gear rigs, even a forge furnace shaped like a roaring lion. His fingers twitch with ideas the second he steps inside. Home? Finally. Even if it smells like charred unicorn horn. And this time, Olympus doesn't just hand him a title, they give him full freedom. He can build what he wants. Sculpt with volcanic glass, shape alloys that shimmer like moonlight and hum when angry. His official role becomes god of fire and craftsmanship. But unofficially, he's Olympus's tech support, weaponsmith, security detail, and industrial designer rolled into one ashy package. First order of business, rebranding. No more of that googly god stuff. He crafts himself new tools, including a set of beautifully intricate tongs that only respond to his touch. They function almost like a conductor's baton, drawing out metal into strings, pulsing with fire, resonating like they understand his thoughts. And then comes the forge upgrade. Now you've probably imagined a forge as a room with anvils and some coals. Hephaestus, he thinks bigger. His new workspace isn't a room, it's a complex. A labyrinth of tunnels inside Mount Etna, rigged with ventilation chutes, lava sluices, and pulley systems so advanced, even Da Vinci would get a nosebleed trying to map it. Bronze maidens flit from chamber to chamber, their joints clicking softly, always aware of their master's needs. Tools hang from the ceiling and lower themselves into his hands. A hammer begins glowing red just before he touches it. This isn't crafting, it's symphony. Historians still argue whether these descriptions were metaphors for real ancient workshops or just straight-up fantasy. But some fringe researchers point out that ancient Greek temples did use rudimentary automation. Doors that opened by fire, statues that moved slightly when touched. Could Hephaestus's myths be exaggerations of early engineering? Maybe. Or maybe he just was that guy. Hephaestus, despite all the new respect, doesn't forget his roots. He keeps that donkey nearby, still prefers it to a winged horse. Keeps odd hours, and while the other gods are off seducing mortals or flinging thunderstorms in petty disputes, he's here, tinkering. Always tinkering. And here comes his big moment. The gods need armor. War's on the horizon, as usual. This time it's some clash involving mortals, sea monsters, and a bit of divine overreaction. Ares wants his spear sharpened. Athena requests something tactical but elegant. And Zeus? He just grunts and gestures vaguely at his lightning bolts, like, do your thing. But it's Apollo who's first to notice something new. Hephaestus isn't just making gear, he's testing exoskeletons. Large bronze gauntlets that amplify strength. Graves that let you leap over rivers. Helmets that interface. Somehow. With the wearer's thoughts. They're calling it magic, but you get the distinct feeling this is closer to biomechanics. One set in particular catches your eye. Gleaming bronze, with articulated joints, subtle steam ports, and inscriptions that shimmer as if reciting code. It's a full suit. Not for a god. Not even for a mortal. It's for Hephaestus himself. The original Greek mech suit. He built it so he could walk without pain. So he could stand level with the other gods. And if the suit also contains a few hidden blades, a deployable net, and a defense matrix that sounds suspiciously like sarcasm, well, that's just bonus functionality. When he first wears it, the forge quiets. The gods stop bickering. For a heartbeat, Olympus watches a once broken god stand taller, glow brighter, and move with grace engineered. Not granted. And it's not just armor. It's defiance. It's creativity wrapped in bronze. He didn't beg to belong. He built himself a seat at the table, and then made the table adjustable with hydraulic lift. Hephaestus stands there in his self-made armor, joints humming quietly with power, every inch of bronze a middle finger to anyone who ever called him less. But he's just getting started. You trail behind him as he glides, not limps, through his forge, now a swirling ballad of sparks, gears, and heat. He's not just crafting weapons anymore. He's building companions, assistants, maybe even friends. And first among these creations, the golden servant girls.
Yes?
Golden. Shaped like young women, polished to a sheen, joints seamless, movement smooth as honey poured on marble. They pour water, stoke fires, offer tools, and, depending on the myth, engage in light banter. You're not imagining it. They're essentially the world's first humanoid AI assistants, long before Siri or Alexa were even a glimmer in silicon. And they're smart, not just glorified butlers. They speak. They learn. One myth says they could even anticipate Hephaestus's moods. Another insists they were programmed dull or, enchanted to soothe him when the forge's heat got to his head. Did he build them out of loneliness? Genius? Both? Hard to say. Even fringe scholars argue over whether these automaton women represent an early mythic form of artificial life, or just an elaborate excuse for why his socks were always folded. But he doesn't stop at metal maids. You glance toward the far end of the forge, where the next round of creations clatter into being. They're strange, horse-shaped things with bellows in their chests, a bird that sings but also spits oil, a cart. No driver. Just gears turning, wheels spinning, moving under its own power like it's on a mission to pick up groceries you never ordered. These aren't just experiments. They're part of his daily workflow. Hephaestus claps his hands once. The cart speeds over to him, stops precisely at his side, and offers up a glowing ingot on a velvet cushion. You blink. Did that cart just bow? Here's where it gets wild. These inventions aren't all new. He's been making them for years. The Golden Maidens were just the beginning. His forge assistants include rolling tripods, 3-legged serving tables that follow him like obedient puppies. Homer even mentions them. They move independently. They know when to come forward. They pause at doorways, like very polite Roombas with divine etiquette. One even spins in a lazy circle, waiting for its turn at the anvil, as if it's jealous of the attention the girls are getting. You can't help but grin at the absurdity. This is Greek mythology, not Westworld. And yet here we are, robotic carts, metal women with built-in manners, and self-piloting furniture. What were the ancient Greeks on? Historians still argue whether these tales were ancient tech dreams or distorted memories of real temple automata. Some temples had doors that opened with fire. Others featured statues that moved thanks to hidden water pressure systems. Hephaestus's creations may have been mythic echoes of early engineering marvels. Or maybe just straight up wishful thinking. Wouldn't it be great? A priest might have said, if the table brought itself to the banquet. What's clear is this: Hephaestus was always thinking beyond his time. He wasn't content to just make swords and shields. He saw a need for help, for independence. So he built it. And though Olympus pretends not to notice, they all secretly benefit. Hermes uses one of the rolling carts to carry his absurd hat collection. Demeter tries to commission a talking plow. Even Poseidon once asked if a bronze dolphin could deliver his mail. Hephaestus said no, not because he couldn't, just because Poseidon was kind of a tool about it. You pass one of the golden maidens now. She pauses mid-stride, inclines her head, and her eyes flash briefly with reflected forge light. For a second, you swear there's thought in there. Not just code, not just magic, something else. And that's what's so haunting about it all. Hephaestus didn't just make things that move. He made things that might understand. They say the bronze girls would sing sometimes if the forge was quiet, not lyrics, not melodies. Just soft humming. Like they remembered something from before they were metal. Or like they dreamed of something more. You glance back at Hephaestus. He's sketching a new design now, brow furrowed, tongue poking from the corner of his mouth, like an overworked architect. You wonder if even he fully grasped what he'd done. Whether he knew he was touching the edge of consciousness. Or if he just liked the company. Either way, the message is clear. If the gods wouldn't accept him, he'd build a world that did. You're still in the forge. Though now, it's feeling more like a showroom. Hephaestus's bronze creations whir and shuffle around like they're rehearsing for a tech demo. And just when you think you've seen it all, metal women, singing carts, bird-shaped oil diffusers, something larger stomps by, loud, heavy. 4 bronze hooves, 2 flaming nostrils, and 0 patience for onlookers. You duck as a full-sized robot cow thunders past, dragging a cart behind it. Yes, robot cows. That's today's vibe. These aren't ornamental statues or parade floats. These are functional creatures, crafted from gleaming bronze, joints lubricated with divine oil, and powered by mechanisms so complex even Daedalus would throw up his hands and say, never mind. The cows can pull carts. They moo. One even flings its tail in irritation, like it's annoyed it didn't get enough charging time last night. Hephaestus built them because, of course, he did. Why rely on mortal livestock when you can just make it? Indestructible, tireless, and never in need of hay. You follow one as it ambles toward a loading station where a group of small automaton hands transfer or into its cart bed. The process is smooth, synchronized. You've seen less efficient factories in modern documentaries. And then you notice the auto carts. They're smaller than the bronze cows, sleeker, faster, shaped less like beasts and more like high-end espresso machines on wheels. They zip along guided tracks etched into the floor, turning corners with impossible precision, humming softly like they're whistling a mechanical lullaby. Each one is assigned a rote materials from Chamber A, scraps to Chamber B, finished goods to the gods. One particularly peppy cart zips past with a plate of glowing nails. Another brings in golden thread, delivered with the poise of a Michelin star waiter. Historians still argue whether these moving devices reflect real, lost tech or metaphorical descriptions of divine ease. But some ancient inventors, like Hero of Alexandria, did create self-opening temple doors and coin-operated machines. So maybe Hephaestus's world wasn't entirely myth, maybe it was just the prototype. And here's a quirky tidbit: you didn't expect he made one of these auto carts to deliver wine only to himself. It follows him around like a sommelier with loyalty issues, offering drinks at just the right moment. Even the other gods mock it gently, until they realize they want one. But the true spectacle, watching it all operate without direct command. Hephaestus doesn't bark orders or yank levers. His machines know. They respond to gestures, tones, maybe even moods. It's more ballot than assembly line. He's working now, arms deep in a half-built automaton shaped like a griffin. Sparks dance off his bronze gauntlets. A golden cow moos approvingly from behind. The scene shouldn't make sense, and yet it does. Somehow, this chaotic blend of steampunk livestock and clockwork efficiency works. Every invention solves a problem, and the problems, often ones the other gods didn't even realize they had. Hephaestus doesn't just build for glory, he builds to make Olympus function. Cleaner, smoother, smarter. You wander through another section of the forge. Here, idle carts line up like obedient pets. A few appear decommissioned, scrapped for parts or maybe just asleep. One has a dented side with a childlike flower etched into the bronze. You wonder if it tried to decorate itself, or if Hephaestus got sentimental. A small tablet hangs nearby, with strange symbols scrawled in glowing ink. It hums faintly like it's syncing with the network. Yes, you're realizing now this forge is wired. Not in the way your phone is, but close. There's a system. Signals. Maybe even data? Divine data. Sure, but data all the same. You're inside what's essentially the first smart factory, and this is where things get eerie. You spot a prototype. Just a shell. But humanoid in shape. No face. No limbs yet, but its chest cavity has gears arranged like a rib cage. It almost breathes. Not literally, but the rise and fall of internal pistons give the illusion. You stand there transfixed and swear you hear a whisper. Not words. Just the sound of thought forming. Because that's the question, isn't it? When do these creations stop being tools and start being something more? You turn, startled, as one of the carts brushes gently against your foot. It backs up, pauses, then zips off in another direction, almost like it was apologizing. And Hephaestus. He just chuckles from across the room and mutters, "She's shy. You're deeper in the forge now, almost to the edge of its structured chaos, when you hear it." Thud hiss. Tada, a rhythmic clanking, like someone dragging a metal pole across stone with each step. Then a pause. Then a return. You creep forward through a steam-misted hallway, and there it is. Looming, gleaming, and very much on patrol. Talos. He doesn't see you? At least you hope not. His head swivels mechanically, scanning with blank bronze eyes. One foot lifts. The ankle clicks. He steps, then swings around the curve of the forge, like he's patrolling an invisible coastline. Which, you realize, he actually was. Talos was Hephaestus's crowning defensive project, a bronze automaton so enormous and devoted that it guarded the island of Crete by walking its entire perimeter. Over and over, no breaks, no charging stations, no union, mandated rest days, just endless circling, like a paranoid Amazon warehouse robot hopped up on divine firmware. You imagine it now, Crete, sun, bleached and dotted with shrines. Tourists. Sailors, arrive eager to trade or pray or just snag some olives. But then comes the tremor. The ground shakes. A shadow passes. Talos. He hurls boulders. Not rolls. Hurls. Melts lead and throws it like a discus. And, if legends are true, gets unreasonably close to screaming, "This beach is closed!" In ancient Greek. He's not mindless, though. That's the unsettling part. According to the myth, he was gifted, or cursed, with one vein, a single divine circuit, running from neck to ankle and sealed with a nail. It pulsed with Eker, the golden blood of the gods, his power source, his weakness. You circle around him in the forge now, half terrified he'll react, but he doesn't. He's in a rest loop, probably waiting to be called back into action. Historians still argue whether Talos represents an early mythological drone or a metaphor for rigid law and order. A tireless enforcer. One scholar suggested Talos was a stand-in for local militias who guarded ports, exaggerated over centuries until the patrolman grew 10 feet tall and bronze, skinned. Another theory, that he was a holdover from a much older religion, some pre-Greek, Cretan deity repurposed into robot mode. Fringe, yes, but not impossible. Here's the quirk: some tales claim Talos could talk. Not in long lectures, but in warnings. He would hail approaching ships, demand credentials, and even offer them a chance to leave peacefully. Which is hilarious, considering most of the time he followed up with bolder-based diplomacy. In the forge, Hephaestus is tweaking a smaller version, mini Talos, if you will. This one's about human-sized, still heavy, still menacing, but with upgraded eyes and a slightly less murdery stance. It's labeled Menkei. The others, lined up in the background like backup dancers in a bronze ballet. Security units. Hephaestus says to no one in particular, though you catch the words. Talos was just the prototype. You raise an eyebrow. Just. That walking lighthouse of doom was a beta test. Turns out, Talos was only one of many defense projects. Most never left the drawing board. One had wings, one had underwater propulsion. One, rumored, at least, could split into smaller automata, like metallic Russian nesting dolls, each with a different specialty. Surveillance, repair, demolition. Yes, Hephaestus basically predicted the drone swarm. And why not? The gods were always feuding, always vulnerable. Olympus needed protection, and who better to build it than the one god who knew what rejection felt like? Who better to design sentries than someone who once guarded his own pride with a golden throne trap? Back to Talos, on Crete, he was feared and worshipped. Locals offered him gifts, not because he was divine, but because they really didn't want to be stomped. His patrols became legend. His shadow across the water, enough to make pirates reroute. But every guardian has its flaw. That one vein, the divine USB cable sealed by a nail, was his undoing. More on that later. For now, you take a last look at Talos, still and gleaming. Even in rest mode, he radiates intention. This isn't just a pile of parts. This is purpose, sculpted in metal. And you finally understand. Hephaestus doesn't just forge things to last. He forges them to remember. You're aboard the Argo now. Or at least a very creaky, very nervous dream version of it. The deck smells like salt and sandalwood. The sails snap under a brisk Aegean wind. And your fellow crew members keep glancing toward the horizon like something's out there. Something tall. Something bronze. Jason, the hero, the guy with the golden fleece resume, is pacing. Medea, the not quite trustworthy sorceress, stands at the bow, eyes narrowed. She's not worried about the wind. She's worried about the guard, Talos. The bronze giant you just met in the forge is now very much active, stomping along the cliffs of Crete with all the subtlety of a marching band on stilts. You hear the impact of his footsteps, like distant thunder. The Argo rocks slightly with each one. He's watching. Always watching. Your crew murmurs about options. Bribe it. Distract it. Row really, really fast. And that's when Medea steps forward. Here's your mainstream fact. Medea was the niece of Circe, meaning sorcery runs deep in her family. She doesn't carry a sword. She doesn't shout. She just holds a vial and whispers. You squint. She's not casting a fireball. She's going inward, looking for the blueprint. Not of Talos' metal, but of his magic. Remember that single vein of ichor. Medea knows about it. Knows where it ends, behind the ankle. The divine Achilles heel before Achilles made it trendy. Some versions say she used her magic to lull Talos into a trance. Words like a lullaby coded in hexes. Others claim she summoned death itself. Thanatos, in smoky form, to extract the nail and let the ichor spill. Either way, the result is the same. Talos topples. It's not a crash. It's a collapse. Like a temple giving up. A long moan of metal and memory. And when he hits the ground, it's quiet. Unnervingly quiet. The kind that follows the end of something old. Now, quirky detail time. Some retellings swear Talos didn't die angry. That in his final moments, he paused, looked down at Medea, not with fury, but with understanding, like part of him knew he was outdated. A relic. That he wasn't beaten, just retired. Historians still argue whether this myth is a moral parable or a metaphor for evolving technology. Was Talos the symbol of brute force, undone by cunning intellect? A stand-in for the fall of old world automata as new magic, new knowledge, rose. And what was Hephaestus' reaction? We don't get that part of the myth, but you can imagine it, can't you? Back in the forge, a tremor underfoot. The the brief flicker of one of his bronze tablets, and the understanding unit deactivated. Hephaestus doesn't rage, doesn't cry, he just notes it, and then probably starts work on version 2. But let's backtrack, because there's something chilling about the method used. Medea didn't fight Talos, she hacked him. She went after his design, his firmware. She studied the mythic schematics and exploited the flaw. That's not heroism, that's reverse engineering. And if Talos had any thought, any awareness, it makes the whole thing sadder. Because he wasn't evil. He was programmed. He was doing his job. You kneel beside the fallen Talos now, one hand on the cooling metal. It's still warm, still humming faintly. His head is twisted, face turned toward the sea, like he wants to patrol one more time. The Eker, the divine life, blood has seeped out into the sand. It glows faintly under the moon. The crew cheers. But you don't. You feel the weight of what's been lost. Because whether he was a machine, a guardian, or something in between, Talos was more than just code and bronze. He was a question: what happens when the things we build become real enough to be mourned? The dust of Talos has barely settled when you're back in Hephaestus's forge, and everything suddenly feels heavier. Not just emotionally. Literally. The tools are thicker, the metal stockpiles larger, and the sparks flying from the anvils burn brighter. He's making something new. Something the gods themselves are pacing around waiting for. Because Olympus is gearing up for war, you round a corner into what can only be described as the divine armory. Rows of racks lined with armor that glows faintly even in the darkness. Swords that hum, shields that shimmer with moving constellations across their faces. This isn't blacksmithing. This is divine engineering at its peak. Hephaestus doesn't just make things stronger, he makes them perfect. Fitted to the god or hero who'll wield them, responsive to their movements, infused with whatever enchantments he finds lying around. Because, let's face it, if you're working with molten starlight and unicorn sinew thread, you might as well go full extra. Take Achilles, for example. Hephaestus forged that guy's armor during the Trojan War. The stories say the breastplate was so polished it reflected the entire world, land, sky, and sea. The shield, not just a piece of gear, a cosmic tablet. It held the whole of human life etched in concentric circles: war, peace, dancing, harvest, stars. Not bad for a guy whose hammer hand doesn't always stop shaking from the weight of expectation. You watch him work, muscles flexing as he pours lava, hot metal into a mold shaped like a scorpion's tail. This one's for Ares, probably. It looks like something that bites. And then there are the thunderbolts. Yes, the thunderbolts. Zeus's signature weapons. They don't grow on trees. Hephaestus makes them. And you've never seen a more complicated build. Each one involves dozens of parts: bronze core, gold plating, quartz crystals charged by storm spirits. He even has a rack where incomplete bolts spark and whine like toddlers in timeout. You peer at the instructions. They're written in a language that's half schematic, half divine poetry. You get the sense that if you read it out loud, your hair would ignite and your toes might turn into pine cones. Here's the quirky bit. Not all the weapons are functional. Hephaestus has a section labeled Prototypes. One sword swings itself but refuses to stop mid-slice. A bow that fires arrows backwards. A helmet that lets the wearer read thoughts, but only fish. He laughs when he shows you, wheezing through his beard, like a kid with a broken RC car. These are failures, but also ideas, and he loves them. You wander deeper into the vault, and find the most bizarre project yet: armor meant for non-gods. Mortals. He's testing designs for humans. Smaller scale, but just as refined. One set looks designed for a child, maybe a young hero, or perhaps a tribute to his own lost innocence. Another bears the emblem of Artemis's huntresses. Though, when you ask about it, Hephaestus just grunts and keeps hammering. Historians still argue whether these weapons were symbolic, allegorical, or straight-up propaganda. Were they meant to awe mortals into obedience? Did they reflect real tools of war, enhanced and glamorized? Or were they narrative props, there to show how divine involvement always tips the scales? What's certain is this: if a god or a hero made headlines, Hephaestus probably made their gear. And he didn't do it for praise. Most of the gods never even thanked him. Some offered gifts, meaning a half-hearted prayer or an IOU scratched into marble. Hephaestus accepted it all with a grunt and kept working. Because he didn't need applause. He needed purpose, and weapons, while grim, gave him purpose in spades. You linger at a final display. Its armor unlike anything else. Not shiny, not dramatic, just solid, perfectly proportioned, engraved with words you don't understand. It has no owner. Yet, you glance at Hephaestus, who notices you staring. One day, he mutters, someone will need that, and I'll be ready. That's the core of it, isn't it? Hephaestus isn't just the gods' arms dealer. He's their silent strategist, always preparing. For war. For peace. For needs no one else sees coming. And if they don't need it yet, he forges anyway. You're standing in a corner of the forge now that feels private. Fewer sparks. Dimmer light. The clang of metal fades as you follow a corridor lined with velvet, draped weapon racks and softly glowing statues. And there, framed in amber torchlight, is the moment no one likes to talk about. Hephaestus' wedding. To Aphrodite, you've heard the jokes, beauty and the blacksmith, the goddess of love shackled, figuratively and literally. To the lame, suit-streaked god of metal. On paper, it's the ultimate odd couple. She, radiant and perfect, born from sea foam. He, gruff and stumbly, raised by sea nymphs, but about as romantic as a crankshaft. But Olympus didn't do love matches. It did politics. And this marriage, a peace treaty disguised as a honeymoon. You duck as a golden swan. Shaped automaton flutters past carrying love letters between shrines. They're all addressed to the most reluctant bride, from the god who builds feelings like furniture. See, the marriage was Zeus's idea. Aphrodite was too desirable. Everyone wanted her, including some gods who got very territorial about it. Ares, Hermes, Poseidon. Even Apollo tossed his golden hair in the ring. But Zeus thought, who better to contain that chaos than Hephaestus, the most neutral god, the least likely to start a scandal. Spoiler alert, didn't work. Aphrodite did marry Hephaestus. The wedding was divine, the reception lasted weeks, and the gossip never stopped. But from day one, she wasn't faithful. Everyone knew it. Everyone whispered it. And Hephaestus, he knew too. But instead of raging or sulking or writing sad poetry, he did what he always did. He built. His workshop grew colder. The laughter stopped. And soon, he began designing something far from romantic. A trap. Not a throne this time, but a net. Invisible. Unbreakable. Woven from the thinnest, strongest threads in existence. Gleaming strands of celestial gold. Fine enough to pass through light. Strong enough to hold a god. He planted it above their bed. One day, while he left, for the forge, Aphrodite invited Ares over. The affair was never subtle, but this time, as they embraced, the trap snapped. Boom, net drops. Tangled in mid-lust, can't move, can't escape, and then Hephaestus enters. He doesn't strike. He just calls a meeting. Yes, a full Olympus, wide gathering. The gods arrive. Zeus, Poseidon, Hermes, Apollo, even Dionysus, who brings popcorn. They crowd around the bed, where Aphrodite and Ares are tangled in their golden snare, the ultimate divine walk of shame. And Hephaestus, he just points and says, Exhibit A. Historians still argue whether this scene was a morality play or a comic interlude for temple audiences. Was it a statement about the blindness of love, the absurdity of justice among immortals, or just ancient Greek humor? Slapstick but divine. Whatever the point, it worked. Hephaestus demanded repayment from Zeus for the humiliation. Some myths say Zeus refused, others say Poseidon, half laughing, promised to cover the cost if Hephaestus let the lovers go. He did. The trap released. Aphrodite fled, Ares sulked. And Hephaestus, he went back to work. Because even heartbreak couldn't stop his hands. If anything, they moved faster. You walk past the remnants of the net, now hanging in a corner like a museum relic. It sparkles faintly, still whispering with captured moments. Regret, pride, resignation. And near it, etched in the wall by a trembling tool hand, is a line of text in ancient script. You don't know the language, but you know what it means. Even gods bleed alone. Quirky detail. One of the net's threads was later used by Hermes to tether a flying tortoise shell, creating the first layer. So out of marital disaster came music. And Hephaestus, he never remarried, never chased Aphrodite, never tried to replace her. He just built more traps and more ways to escape them. You linger in the forge, the echo of that golden net still fresh in your mind. And now it's time to see it from a different angle. Because the scandal of Hephaestus and Aphrodite doesn't end with one trap and one bed. Found exposed, no. Olympus ran on drama like your phone runs on battery. And this saga kept recharging. Welcome to the Hephaestus vs. Ares side quest. The setting, same bed, same golden snare, but the tension, elevated. See, Ares wasn't just a rival. He was everything Hephaestus wasn't: tall, muscled, admired, impulsive, and endlessly romantic, in a kind of punch-first way. And Aphrodite, she loved it. Or at least, she loved the attention. Hephaestus watched from the sidelines as the god of war strutted around, kissed his wife, and practically dared him to react. And for a long time, he didn't. He just worked. Quietly. Methodically. Which, as you know by now, is never a good sign. You walk through a sub-level of the forge now. Darker. Quieter. The walls hum with stored energy, and at the center of the chamber, there it is again, the infamous net. This time displayed in full, draped like a curtain made of sunlight. You see how fine it is, impossible to grasp with your eyes. It's less a trap, more a concept of confinement. Hephaestus designed it for a single purpose, not to punish, but to expose. He wanted Olympus to see what he saw every day, the smirks, the whispered glances, the betrayal that everyone else treated as open secret. When he triggered the net and caught Ares and Aphrodite mid-act, it wasn't just revenge. It was a performance. A divine TED Talk titled, "So Your Marriage is a Joke, and Nobody Told You?" And here comes the parade of gods. Poseidon, always the peacekeeper when not turning into sea creatures for romantic reasons, offered to pay Ares' fine. Hermes reportedly laughed so hard he almost turned blue. Apollo made a pun. And Dionysus, well, he tried to sell tickets to a reenactment. Only the goddesses refused to attend, possibly out of solidarity, possibly because Olympus's HR department had already given up. Quirky side note: Ares, post-trap, was humiliated for centuries. Poets made fun of him. Priests downplayed him. Statues of the net scene popped up in more places than you'd think. Hephaestus became, briefly, the patron saint of revenge done with elegance and mechanical precision. But did it help? That's the real question. Historians still argue whether this exposure achieved anything lasting. Did Aphrodite stop cheating? No. Did Ares back off? Also no. Did Hephaestus gain respect? Kind of. But only in that way where everyone nods and then continues their nonsense behind his back. And yet, the moment endured. Because for one fleeting point in immortal history, Hephaestus won. Not with fists. Not with seduction. But with sheer, glittering ingenuity and the fallout. Surprisingly quiet, Hephaestus went back to work. Ares sulked. Aphrodite smiled like nothing happened. And you? You stepped back from the net display, watching it shimmer in artificial torchlight, and realized that sometimes power isn't about strength or beauty. Sometimes it's about seeing the truth, wrapping it in bronze wire, and letting it drop right on top of the lies. You pass by another project now. One Hephaestus started not long after the scandal. It's shaped like a heart, not anatomically correct. This is mythology, after all, but stylized, mechanical, full of cogs and pulleys. It doesn't beat, it clicks. Softly, rhythmically, and nearby in the dust, a single phrase scratched by a distracted stylus: love can't be built, but it can be trapped. And maybe that's all he ever really wanted. Not revenge, not forgiveness, just for someone to see him. The clank of gears and distant hissing of steam fade as you enter the next chamber, and suddenly, you're not surrounded by God-crafted tools or glittering armor. Instead, you're in the menagerie, the mechanical menagerie. It's where Hephaestus' more whimsical side gets to shine. Because sure, he builds death machines, but sometimes he just wants to make a bronze lion that can roar on command. And right beside it, he's got android horses. You duck as one clatters past. This one's not just decorative. It's fully articulated, flame, snorting, and powered by some divine equivalent of a turbo engine. It's made to carry a god across the skies, not just trot through meadows. And here's the kicker. It listens to voice commands. Probably more obedient than most actual horses. Possibly more obedient than most gods. Hephaestus built these not just for utility, but for spectacle. Because when your fellow immortals treat you like a backup generator, sometimes you build a cavalry that sings when it runs. Nearby, a lion paces. You know it's not alive, but still, there's something unnerving about the way it moves. Too smooth. Too aware. It stalks in a loop around a pedestal, tail twitching, ears swiveling toward even the smallest sound. You approach it slowly and realize its eyes are hollow, but deep. Like they were made to see, not just display. Quirky fact, one myth says Hephaestus made these lions to guard sacred spaces, especially temples or treasure vaults. They didn't just sit still. They tracked intruders, roared loud enough to collapse marble, and once, allegedly, chased a minor deity all the way to Libya. The horses, too, weren't just mounts. They were statements. Bronze steeds that needed no reins. Some had wings, others had storage compartments. One could gallop across water. Another was said to predict earthquakes. Historians still argue over whether these creatures symbolized power, protection, or simply divine eccentricity. One theory suggests they were metaphors for temple statues that moved via hidden pulleys or steam systems. Early automata created to impress and maybe intimidate worshippers. But you know Hephaestus. He never builds anything just for show. Take the lion pacing now. It's not just decoration. It's surveillance. Its paws make no sound. Its movements sync with subtle vibrations in the floor. It is always on. You edge past it toward a recharging station. Yes, they have one. Where several creatures are parked like sleepy zoo exhibits. There's a bronze eagle sharpening its wings. A fox with spring-loaded legs. A peacock that occasionally fizzles like it's remembering how to dance. And at the far end, a project clearly still in progress. A creature you can't quite name. It's got a horse's frame, a lion's head, and wings folded so neatly they look like part of the wall. But its chest cavity is open, exposed, wires like vines tangled inside. It's breathing, but with huffs of steam, not air. You swear it's waiting for something. Not orders. Permission. And that's the unsettling brilliance of Hephaestus' work. It doesn't just function. It seems to anticipate. These aren't toys, they're simulations of life. They respond. React. Sometimes, maybe, they hope. There's even a story, fringe, of course, that one of Hephaestus' horses fell in love with a mortal's mare. Not metaphorically. Fully mechanical infatuation. The mare, confused, ignored it. The bronze horse stood outside the barn for days, winning in pre-programmed longing. Ridiculous. Sure. But in this place, surrounded by animate animals that never sleep, who's to say what's ridiculous anymore? You wander back to the center of the menagerie and realize something chilling. Hephaestus didn't give these creatures gods to serve. He didn't build them for Aphrodite, or Ares, or even Zeus. He built them for himself. Companions, guards, colleagues who never laughed at his limp, beasts who couldn't betray. And maybe, in their humming, pawing, watchful way, they understood him better than any god ever did. Now you're standing in a workshop, unlike the others. A vault sealed behind a bronze door, etched with impossible geometry, only accessible through a sequence of gestures that probably count as a dance if done to music. When it finally opens, you feel a change in pressure, like the air itself is holding its breath. Because here, deep in the heart of Hephaestus's forge, is the question no one else dared ask. What even is bronze intelligence? You walk past a workable cluttered with half-assembled heads. Not decorative busts. Functional. Lifelike faces frozen mid-expression. Some frowning, others almost smiling, one looking downright insulted to be unplugged. Each skull is packed with copper filaments, gears smaller than sand grains, and crystalline nerve clusters that blink softly like dreams. Trying to reboot, you place a hand on one of them. It's warm, it hums faintly. Somewhere inside, something might be thinking. Hephaestus appears behind you, quiet as ever. He's holding a tablet, a literal one, etched with tiny glyphs glowing faintly. A blueprint, a poem, a program, you can't tell. He gestures to the heads and says, "They're still learning." That sends a shiver. Because here's the thing, he didn't just build machines, he built potential. Some of the automata you've seen follow clear orders. Guard this, fetch that, moo on command. But others, they hesitate. Choose paths? Look around corners. One golden maiden once stopped mid-task, knelt, and rearranged pebbles into a spiral on the floor before returning to work. No one told her to. She just wanted to. Historians still argue whether the idea of bronze intelligence in Greek myth was meant to hint at artificial thought, or just divine mystery. Some claim these stories mirror humanity's oldest question: can we make something that thinks? Quirky detail: a few myths say Hephaestus kept a bronze bird that whispered riddles to itself all day long. Riddles it had invented, not recycled, not remembered. Invented. The gods didn't pay much attention. To them, the automata were tools. Background noise. Only Athena seemed to notice, and even she grew uneasy. The idea that something created by hands, not born of chaos or titans, could someday decide. Unsettling. You peer at a schematic pinned to the wall. It shows a cube with a heart inside it. Not poetic, literal. A mechanical pump surrounded by fibers that react to pressure, heat, even emotion. You read the scribbled note beside it. If it can feel pain, does it dream of fire? Whoa. You move deeper into the chamber, past experiments that stretch the boundary between engineering and empathy. A bronze boy, eyes downcast, fingers perpetually twitching as if remembering a forgotten tune. A centaur that paces in perfect, anxious loops, pausing every seventh turn to look over its shoulder. These aren't soldiers. They're something else. Possibly selves. And what powers them? That's the million drachma mystery. There's no divine spark like in Pandora, no crystal core. Some whisper of Ichor, sure, but Hephaestus rarely uses God's blood. He doesn't trust it. Too temperamental, too tied to Olympus politics. Instead, he builds logic, memory, pattern. You find a metal fox with rotating eyes and discover it's learning your face. A tiny click behind its eyes every time you move. By the third time you circle it, it flinches before you reach for it. That's not magic. That's feedback. Hephaestus catches your expression and chuckles. A rusty sound, like a saw blade dragging over brass. They're not alive, he mutters. But they remember what it felt like to be made. You don't know what that means. Not exactly, but it follows you as you leave the vault. You glance back at the heads, the spiraling pebbles, the watching eyes. And for the first time, you wonder. They wake up completely. What will they think of him? You've seen the robots, the heartbreak. You've peeked into Hephaestus's blueprints and his bronze menagerie. But now you feel it, the quiet. A hush settling over the forge like cooling ash. This is the part most myths skip. The final arc, because even gods get tired. Hephaestus is older now. You can see it in the way he moves. Not slower, exactly, but more deliberate. The limp is still there, but it's grown into his rhythm, like the forge itself adjusts to his step. His hands, once stained and swift, are steadier, heavier, less invention, more reflection. The forge hasn't stopped burning. The automatons still shuffle and click, but they no longer multiply. The lion naps more than it paces. The carts pause longer between tasks. Even the golden maidens have a dreaminess to their steps, like they're walking through memory. Hephaestus has stopped expanding. Instead, he maintains, you wander past old projects covered in canvas sheets, a self-writing scroll, a harp with no strings, a nearly finished centaur, one hand half, raised in what might have been a wave, all paused, all preserved, and up above, carved into the volcanic stone, is a mural. You hadn't noticed it before. A timeline. In relief, the baby hurled from Olympus. The sea, nymph years. The forge rising from lava. The throne trap. The wedding. The net. The army of bronze. The giant, the lion, the heartbreak. It's all there. He carved it himself, bit by bit between projects. You see it in his expression etched into the last panel alone. But not bitter. Focused. Olympus still sends orders, of course. Requests for new weapons. An upgraded chariot. Poseidon wants a trident that can play music underwater. Hermes wants roller skates. Hephaestus nods, says he'll get to it. Mostly, he doesn't. Instead, he tinkers on one last project. You approach it now. It's enormous, 20 feet tall, humanoid, but abstract. Smooth panels instead of muscles. No face, no arms yet, just a central core, pulsing. Warm, almost like a heartbeat. It's not labeled, no notes, no blueprints. It's not a warrior, not a servant. You can't tell what it is. And Hephaestus won't tell you. He just looks at it sometimes. Presses his hand to the side like he's listening. Maybe it's a god. Maybe it's a grave. Maybe it's both. Historians still argue whether Hephaestus vanished, retired, or burned away in his forge. Some say he simply stopped showing up to meetings on Olympus. Others claim they saw him walking into the volcano itself, alone, calm, dragging his final creation behind him. The myths get quieter after that. His name pops up less. His tools pass into legend, a bronze cog here, a net wire there. They call him the old god now. Rivered, but distant, like a genius whose time passed too quickly or too slowly. Quirky note, one myth says he built a robot to remember him. Just one. Programmed not to fight, not to serve, but to tell his story. A walking archive, still wandering somewhere in the world, repeating the tale of the lame god, who made gods need him. You step back and realize Hephaestus wasn't a warrior. He wasn't a lover. He wasn't even a leader. He was a builder. And builders don't conquer. They leave behind blueprints. The forge is quiet now. Truly quiet. No sparks. No clicking bronze heels. The heat is still there, yes, eternal and slow, burning, the kind of warmth that comes not from rage or ambition, but from coals left alone too long. They don't flare anymore. They glow. Hephaestus sits alone. You almost don't recognize him. The suit is gone, his beard trimmed, the tools set neatly on the bench, lined up like loyal soldiers who know they won't be called again. He doesn't speak. Instead, he lifts a small piece of bronze, simple, curved, no fancy carvings. It's not a weapon, not armor, just a piece of something unfinished. You get the sense it's a part of that final, faceless giant, tucked away behind the curtains of his forge. He turns it over in his hands, fingers calloused from millennia, tracing the metal like it might whisper something back. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't need to. You wander the workshop one last time. Everything feels softened. The golden maidens no longer bustle. They rest against walls, heads bowed like statues at a tomb. The lion, curled near a cooling pit, chest rising in slow, mechanical breaths. The eagle on its perch hums a lullaby to no one. And you finally understand what's happened. Hephaestus didn't stop because Olympus didn't need him. He stopped because, for the first time, he didn't need Olympus. He had built his world. Not just tools. Not just guards or nets or war machines. He built memory. Built stories in steel, regret in gold, defiance in every screw and piston. And now he lets it go. The forge dims. The last cart zips once across the floor. A final lap in tribute, then rolls itself gently into a wall recess. The lights flicker. Not because something's failing, but because everything is saying goodbye. You return to Hephaestus. He places the bronze piece down, carefully, like an offering. Then he leans back, closes his eyes, and exhales. He doesn't need applause. Never did. He just needed someone to see what he made, to remember. And now, so do you. You linger in the forge's soft shadows now, surrounded by quiet. The kind of quiet that settles deep in your chest and smooths every sharp edge. You hear the faint ticking of metal cooling, the last breath of steam sighing through ancient pipes. A lion's tail swishing once in a dream. And in that stillness, it finally sinks in. This isn't just a story about gods and myths and impossible machines. It's about effort, about being overlooked, about building anyway, not for praise or power or beauty, but because something inside you has to create. Maybe you feel that too, the quiet need to make something, even if no one claps, even if they laugh, even if they don't understand. Hephaestus understood, and he built anyway. So as you drift now, let your breath slow. Let the forge's warmth settle over you, heavy and comforting. Let your thoughts soften, one by one, like tools placed gently back on their hooks. There's nothing left to solve tonight, no battles to plan, no thrones to trap, just glowing coals, rested machines, and a quiet, brilliant mind, finally at peace. You did well to stay this long. Now let yourself sleep.